What's up, everybody? Pastor Carey Robinson right here with another episode of MC Unpacked. This is my friend Michael Whittle.
Hello.
It is going to be an awesome episode. We are talking Dylan Mulvaney, Bud Light, church hurt, and Michael's pronouns. Stick around for another episode of MC Unpacked. Michael freaking Whittle.
Hello.
What are your pronouns? I forgot what they are. Giger and they, them?
He, him, hers, actually.
Oh, dude, it's good to have you in the studio.
It's good to be here.
And we actually have a studio audience. What's up, studio audience? Say hello.
Hello.
There's 75 people in my garage right now.
There is.
And I'm glad you're here, man. We're going to have a fun time. We're going to talk about some fun things. But why don't you tell the world a little bit about yourself? Who are you? Where are you from? What are your real pronouns?
My name is Michael.
Let's go.
Whittle.
This
Born
has
and
been
raised.
brought to you by
LaCroix.
LaCroix.
Paying tons of money to be sponsored. From Dallas, Texas.
Let's go.
Just outside of Dallas, Texas. Actually, just a few houses down from where your amazing wife.
That's exactly
grew
right.
up.
Which is odd, but and cool.
Yeah.
Which is
Born and raised in Dallas. Moved to LA, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
The less cool version of Southern California.
Yeah, it's a fact.
13 years ago.
Craziness.
So.
And what do you do in Los Angeles right now?
So I am, my wife and I helped, we're a part of a team that helped plant a church in 2015 with some of our best friends in the world. And so we do that. We help build a church called C3LA.
Yep.
And then my wife works for an incredible company. And then I have a kind of a media startup that I've been running.
That's right.
Or just a baby, been running for about 18 months.
I love it. And the cool part about this is Michael grew up in mine and Megan's youth ministry.
I did.
And actually was there. He was in the youth ministry before we became youth pastors. Mm-hmm. And we started in ministry I was 20, Megan was 35. It was... She's not here to defend herself. She's only 22
I remember
years older
being
than
at
me.
you guys' wedding.
Yeah. Or we didn't have...
And the reason I remember it is because you pretty much invited everyone in the church.
Yeah, there were
and I was
750 people
probably
there.
13 at the time, and I was telling my mom, I'm going to this wedding with these people at church, and she was like, did you get invited? And I was like, everyone's invited.
And
she was like, that's not how it works,
and 50
actually.
people at our wedding. But we walked away with so much cash. It was fantastic.
I bet you did.
Now, my mom and dad were hardcore strict, so we had a 5-piece jazz band with a stand-up bass. It was like freaking amazing, but we weren't allowed to dance, so that was awesome.
Really? There was no dancing?
No dancing. Literally, we staged a picture for my wedding, fake dancing, because we were not allowed to dance.
So
also,
amazing.
could not have alcohol, so I had a pyramid of Dr. Pepper.
Mm-hmm. Okay, to give a little bit more context, you mentioned your parents, who have so
my dad's dead, but thanks for bringing that up, Michael. Go ahead.
I was going to tell a story about him. We were playing flag football one time.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I didn't say the F word, but he thought he heard me say the F word.
He knew your heart.
And I said, I didn't. He really got upset with me.
Yeah.
And he said, you said? And I said freak. And he said, you know in your heart what you meant.
That's exactly right.
And I'll remember that as long as I live.
Rest in peace. He was
He was an amazing guy.
Social activist for Jerry Falwell and other major conservative. Anyways, that's not what we're here talking about. Anyway, so you grew up in our youth ministry, ended up interning with us. We're volunteer staff with us, and then we're on staff at the church there.
Yeah.
And it's cool to have you.
You guys really were, not to get serious, but you guys really were my pastors. I still look at you both that way.
Let's go. I'm sorry.
Very, very influential in my life.
Oh, I love that.
So the reason I'm actually down here in Orange County today is because my wife said, you need to go hang out with Pastor Carey. Text him right now and go spend some time with him because you're acting crazy. So that's why I'm here.
I love that. And you have a son. How old is your son?
Son, he's almost 2.
And you have another one on the way.
Just due in about 2 months.
Nice. I love it. So anyways, that's all the boring accoutrements to the podcast. Let's talk Dylan Mulvaney.
Let's do it.
Let's talk.
I don't know who that is. Can you give me an explanation?
Let's talk this guy, which I know I'm probably not allowed to say that. I think his pronouns are she, her. I don't actually don't know how that works. I apologize if you're watching and you're offended, but you're probably not watching. Let's just be honest. You're probably not watching. And so we have some of our staff in here are working and they're laughing uncontrollably. Sydney, chill out, please. This is be professional. But let's talk Dylan Mulvaney because that girl is blowing up the world right now.
Yep.
I mean, I know if you're listening and watching and you don't know what's happening with Bud Light, not Bud White. That's a different
Bud White.
Bud White. That got canceled instantly. Bud White got canceled before it got into production.
Yeah.
But Bud Light, came out and I think they just sent Dylan Mulvaney, who is day 366, I don't know, of transitioning from male to female.
From my understanding, it was like an influencer campaign.
Yeah.
Right? But they say that, but there was a box and a can made for this campaign.
Exactly. Had his or her face.
Yep.
On the can.
It did.
Yeah, on the can. And I don't think they actually sold. I'm trying to turn off the timer on my screen so that I can keep my countdown timer on here. Sorry for the people who are more professional. Right. But yeah, so it's blowing up the world. What are your thoughts on that? Like, tell me what your thoughts are about the current cultural moment that we live in, where it's like you can't have a differing opinion or you're canceled. And then if you are not accepting and tolerant of this, then you're canceled. And then we have biblical views. So give me some feedback.
Well, my initial thoughts on it actually weren't really
brilliant.
Honestly, from the spiritual side or the faith side or the morality side at all, it was from I've long been really interested in advertising.
Okay.
And so I've read a lot of books on advertising, and to me it was like, forget the morality, it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's like advertising for a Big Mac at McDonald's in the middle of Beverly Hills where everyone eats kale and drinks smoothies. Like it was just like, this makes absolutely no sense.
Because you're saying the clientele of Bud Light.
Yeah, it's like
redneck.
Yeah.
Second Amendment, America, Trump 2024.
Exactly.
Like they're driving either Chevys or Ford and making fun of the guys who drive Dodge.
So to me it felt like
wrong crowd,
like an advertiser becoming an activist.
Yeah,
it was like 100%. Why? Like this doesn't even make sense. Why you would think this was a good idea?
Yeah.
So that was my first thing. Was like, why would you even do that in the first place? Right. And then the other thing is, it's interesting because I guess I also didn't realize people had that much of an opinion on their beer that they drank.
Right.
Because they lost, I think it was in the billions,
$6 billion
in market cap in 2 weeks.
They've bounced back since because secret conservatives are like, we're buying while it's low.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for me it was like, I don't know why we have to turn brands into activists all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And this is one of the conversations I was having with someone was like, I'm a conservative Orthodox Christian and I don't need my brands to be pushing. I'm not asking my brands to push my values.
Right.
So what? Like, I don't care if I don't care if what LaCroix's political leanings are.
Right.
I'm not asking them to put mine out in the world or my spiritual beliefs or whatever. So for me, that was my big question: is why do this in the first place? And then, man, it really did set people off. Did you see the videos of like the like
Kid Rock?
Yeah, Kid Rock destroying them.
Let me tell you what I think about Bud Light.
Yeah.
My name is Kid Rock. I do like some old school Kid Rock. I can crush them. In fact, I got to add that to my golf playlist because even that new one where he like redid Sweet Home Alabama. Let's get back on track. That's not what we're talking about.
I guess my thought was this: everybody gets so upset when a Christian figures out a unique way to put their values out into the world, right? So like let's look at that He Gets Us campaign, right? They did a Super Bowl commercial, multiple Super Bowl commercials. They've spent $140 million. We can have a whole nother podcast episode on what we
think about that.
Fair. But at the end of the day, they're really rich. They've made the money, and it's awesome that they're using it to put a message out into the world. But everyone got so mad. People got really mad. How dare you use this platform to push your morals, your values, your beliefs? Yet then on the opposite side, we're supposed to just be like not have anything to say about really a great American brand, like that goes back hundreds of years. 150
or 180, something like that, yeah.
Just deciding out of nowhere, hey, we're not we're just going to like dive off the deep end on this thing.
Yeah.
People got really upset.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that it's unacceptable to push what would in mainstream arenas conservative values, but it is mandated that you accept pushing liberal values?
Well,
I don't mean that whether you're a Democrat or Republican. I'm saying like you guys understand. So listener, just don't freak out about this. You understand, so get over it.
Why do
you think that? Why do you think that if you have conservative views, it's unacceptable to push that, but you have to embrace liberal views, or you are canceled? You're a bigot. You're a hate monger. You are old school. You are archaic. It does not seem like it's both and.
Yeah, because I think the current progressive worldview and the people that are proponents of that, they're basically the new moral majority.
Yes.
And so you either abide by what they have to say.
Yeah.
Or they're going to remind you how intolerant you are. And so it's almost like the power has just kind of like shifted in that way, where I think the thing is they can, to the average person who maybe doesn't like think very deeply about this, that side tends to feel on the surface more empathetic and more loving, and hey, let's just let these people be who they want to be, or let them think this, who really cares. And because I hate to say our side, their side, you know what I mean by that,
right? Because
someone who believes what we believe tends to kind of say, hey, this is what the truth is, this is what we believe about it, automatically that feels like it's excluding someone. And so now all of a sudden we're the ones that are the excluders. If that makes sense.
And therefore, if you're excluding, then it's not acceptable. You have a differing opinion. If you're excluding, you are by nature a bigot.
Yes. And I also think that movement places so much of their identity in that. So you're not attacking a thought or an idea, you're attacking an identity.
Person,
And so there's obviously a defense that comes up, right? Where it's like, if this is based on who you are, then of course you're going to feel like you're being...
Yeah, I wonder, you said something it was good. You said that they're the vocal majority. Do you think that that hardcore of a stance is actually the majority in America today? Or do you just feel like that might be the loudest? Obviously, it's subjective. We can't know the pulse of America, but...
I mean, I would think most people don't really care. They just kind of want to be left alone to believe what they believe.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm totally wrong.
It may be.
Like I live in LA where it's... If you are not supportive of every single possible thing that you can be supportive of, right? So like I see it all
every
the time.
day,
So I can't really, but my feeling is most people like just kind of want the noise to get dialed down.
Or to not be interrupted by it. I just burped up some falafel and...
But I was talking...
It's burning my nostrils.
But I was
You're moving on. I can't move on yet. Let me just have a breath or two. Okay, now we're
disgusting.
Good. All right. Yeah, that's what I feel like right now. It's burning it's all the way up in the nostrils.
But I was talking to my little brother about this recently, who's, he's 30. He's definitely woke. If you're listening, Ryan,
let's go, Ryan.
You're definitely woke. His whole thing was like, why do we have to push any agenda whatsoever? Just let people make the decisions they want to make.
Okay.
And eventually they'll grow out of it. Or eventually that's just, who cares? Like his thing was like, who cares? They'll figure it out. Specifically speaking to the sort of more trans
community
in the young people, and he's like, just leave them alone. Let them do what they're going to do and they'll figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, but at what cost?
Yeah, that's the problem.
And so the idea of like, we just want to like leave it alone. Just let people do what they want to do or whatever. To me is like, but then what issues are we dealing with 10 years from now and 12 years from now and 15 years from now? Because we just said, listen, we're not really going to,
Yeah, I would agree. And what's interesting too is like, I'm at the time of this recording, I'm 42. Michael,
you're...
I know, right? Up there.
You're up there. I'm 37.
This is like gone. It's like there's some stragglers. It's like these guys are the last of the Mohicans here, just hanging out. I've got like patches of AstroTurf in my back that's just parked out and hanging out. I could braid it right now.
Could you?
Yeah. One time, true story, my wife was gone and I had to ask my oldest daughter, Brooklyn, to shave my back.
Oh, my.
She did it. And then within 2 weeks, I got a back shaver from one of my overseers because he was so mortified that I asked my daughter to shave my back. I feel like it builds character, like digging holes.
Yeah.
But here's...
she's still probably dealing with that.
That's fine. She's fine. She can handle it. But let's get back to the subject at hand.
Yes.
Okay, so, I think back, I'm getting older, and I remember being around my aunts and uncles, and they would, in their southern ways, start just talking about, oh my God, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and it was, the jokes of sexual innuendos on television.
Yep.
And then, that was like before Ellen DeGeneres came out.
Was this in and around the time you made me break my secular CDs on the altar?
I was trying to build your
secular
character.
CDs were sin?
Yeah.
Was that? Okay.
I feel like you ended up okay, so you're welcome, Michael Whittle. Also, you made a
Listen,
commitment
it's fine that I spent the entirety of my childhood building an incredible library of secular music that you made me break on an altar.
I made Megan do the same thing. And you know what she broke? Shania Twain.
Okay.
Who's bad?
You want to know another funny story?
Okay,
I got to tell the story.
Let's hear it. Let's get back to it.
We're
going to talk church hurt in a little while,
Yeah.
too. Keep going.
Yeah. One time you caught me watching American Psycho.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you made me step down from leadership.
I did, yeah.
You grounded me from leadership for a month.
Yeah, you're welcome, first of all. Second of all,
speaking of
it
church
was
hurt,
a little narc.
Speaking of church
it was a narc, Courtney Cross, who
trauma,
told me that you and Daniel Cross were watching American Psycho.
We need to change the subject.
We showed up at you. They're going to love this episode. We showed up at your house, knocked on your bedroom window, and I made you come out and confess, and you did have step out of leadership. In full disclosure, was that a bit abrasive? Yes. Did you sign a code saying that you wouldn't watch R-rated movies? Yes. So
true.
Whose integrity is on the line? Not mine.
Hey, and you know what?
Not mine. So you know what? You end up on staff at a church. I feel like
that's true.
You're welcome.
That's true.
I feel like I may have saved you from the depths of hell, Michael Whittle.
Maybe.
This is not what we're here to talk about. Here's my question.
I am thankful for the strong leadership.
Yeah, and
there
you know what?
Go.
We changed ways.
You did.
We made about faces and adjusted. But we'll talk about legalism versus grace on another podcast. On another podcast. Nope. Now I'm getting canceled. Let's continue. So here's my thing. I remember listening to aunts and uncles and mom and dad talk about how the world's going to hell in a handbasket.
Yep.
And their whole point was if somebody doesn't say something, it's only going to get worse.
Yep.
And things progress, and then when it came to the LGBTQ community, that wasn't even a phrase 20 years ago. It might have been. It was so under the radar, nobody knew what to do. But there were subtle hints in all areas of media, and it was weird at first, and then embraced, and to the point now where you can't watch a single show on any platform that is not aggressively flaunting. I'm gonna burp again. I can feel it. It hurts so bad sometimes.
Do you not have like
Tums
or Rolaids? Or?
I just drink LaCroix and it just takes care of the gas. This show is brought to you by Lime LaCroix. So my point is this. There is a truth to the fact that maybe we don't have to make this is an old person statement. We don't have to make a fuss about it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But at the same time, there is a point where you have to say something.
Yeah.
And so I just even remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who is on the I lean conservative politically, not on everything. I really don't. Mostly on like probably 4 of the main 5 or 3 of the main 5 social issues that are kind of plaguing our nation right now. And I remember having a conversation with a guy who leans hardcore left, and he's like, "Why do you even care? Why does this even matter?" And he didn't realize some of the laws that had been passed that we've talked about in previous podcasts, that now my 13, 14-year-old daughter can start taking hormone blockers without our consent.
Without your consent.
And that is a direct ripple effect of stuff that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Well, and not to make this political.
Let's do it.
But last week, Joe Biden said, we don't rate the parent, something to the effect of parents.
Yes.
The kids aren't just the parents' responsibility; they're all of our responsibility.
Right.
That's a really bold statement to make that you don't just say accidentally.
It's ridiculous. And I know you voted for Biden and you love Joe Biden. You have his face tattooed on your back, and I appreciate it. It was great artwork, black and gray. The shading is beautiful. But let's move on. We talked about this last week, or not last week, on our last episode of the podcast, just some of the laws that have been passed in Washington, even the laws that are on the floor here in California. The fact that Washington and California are sanctuary states, so if a minor runs away, the states can actually maintain custody of the child to help them. That's, in my opinion, that's demonic. Not that I actually don't believe that the people who are driving this have horrible intentions. I think they have great intentions. I think that they genuinely think they want to help people. So we should talk about that.
The problem is they think history started 20 years ago.
Because
fact. We're forgetting what this is the beginning steps towards.
Yeah.
That's the scary thing, right?
It's
and
terrifying.
that sounds really dramatic, but it's actually true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
well, that is what's terrifying about it. So the question then becomes, for those of you that are listening that don't know, me and my wife, Michael Whittle.
Surprise!
I've been waiting all day to say that. Me and my wife, Megan Robinson, who is much more attractive than he is, pastor church in Orange County, California. Michael's on staff and has been on staff, a great church in LA. And so we are proponents of building the church. That's
100%.
even your entrepreneurial adventures that you're in currently, they're all centered around how do we advance the kingdom of God. And so the question I think that we have to ask is then what is the responsibility of the church? Because if we become like my dad was before he passed away, thanks for bringing that up, Michael.
Sorry.
On the Facebook freaking. He would just blow your face up with some random statement, and you're weeping as a child because he destroyed your heart. And you're like, oh, but could you have just called me or texted me? And so you're like, oh, okay, maybe that's not the approach, right? So becoming a social media activist is probably not the approach. What do you feel like the response is? When I think about, I don't drink Bud Light. In fact, I've never had a Bud Light.
Really?
Ever in my life.
I've had, Bud Light's good.
I think I've had
a game or something.
No, I never. I've had a
but
total.
I'll never have one again.
No, you will not. You run over him in your Prius.
Yeah, exactly. I literally drive a white Prius.
What's up? My name's Michael. I live in Los Angeles. I drive a Prius. Yeah, it's like a 2008 Prius, isn't it?
I think it's a 2013.
Let's go. It's still running on gas?
It's still running.
Let's go.
Still running.
My point is I don't even drink Bud Light. I've had a total of 3 Coors Lights. And I think never a whole one. I'm not gonna ever buy a Bud Light, but not because Dylan Mulvaney is on there. But at the same time, I feel like that there in our world today, there is a need for a response. Yeah. So one of the things you said earlier, your brother Ryan, who we should give everybody his address so they can mail him a letter, and tell him he's woke. But
he needs to come back to the Lord. If you're listening, Ryan, come back to the Lord.
Come back we're praying.
Do you remember when you guys got in a 9-hour-long conversation till 3 a.m. about him needing to repent, come back to the Lord?
I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah.
He didn't.
No.
But we're praying for you, Ryan. I do love you. What's his social security number? Okay. Anyways, let's get back on track. This is really inappropriate, Michael. I don't appreciate it. I don't remember what I was saying. So
about just let him be.
Yeah, okay. He was saying let them be. And I think that there are a lot of people who would probably associate with that, going, why let them make the decision. If they want to transition, let them transition. If they let people love who they want to love, let people. And I do think that a lot of people feel that way. And I don't crucify me to a certain extent. I can understand that. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're responsible for our own choices. Yeah. If you're an adult, you're responsible. Even Christianity, the very foundation of our faith is predicated on the fact that you have to believe. And if you don't believe, fine. You don't have to worry about it. So I do understand that to a certain extent. But I also feel like I don't even want to try. I'll butcher the Martin Luther King quote, but that there will come a moment in your life that the greatest tragedy was your silence. It's not. I'm butchering it. You get the idea. So I actually do feel like, man, we got to do something.
So I think here's my thoughts on this.
We want to hear the wise words of Michael Whittle.
They're not very wise.
They are.
They're not very wise. I think. So, we live in a country that is free, right? People can make the decisions they want to make. I think there's a huge difference between what we allow minors to do and what we allow adults to do.
Yeah.
Right? And then I also think, we live in a world that is fallen, and so there's always going to be sin.
Yeah.
There's always going to be worldviews differing from what we believe, that people believe are going to bring freedom, but we know we're only going to bring captivity, right? So back to kind of what you said about the social media keyboard warrior kind of thing.
Yeah.
I agree with that if you're talking to people that aren't Christians. One conviction I have is that anyone who says they're a Christian,
right,
and is propagating unchristian beliefs, needs to be treated as a wolf. Forgive me.
Explain what you mean by wolf, because some people would think, I want to be a wolf. That sounds awesome.
Okay.
My pronouns are...
what I mean is like, I'm not propagating everyone go on social... if you do go down the TikTok rabbit hole, there are people that believe that are like...
Oh, I've seen it. I can't... It is mind blowing. But let's keep... When you say a wolf, I feel like
I mean, and look, I get...
Yeah. Go for it,
There
man.
are people who are very influential.
Yeah.
Who are wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
And I actually do not apologize for saying that.
Yeah.
I routinely get rebuked from my pastor for getting in arguments with these people on Twitter. And I'm not my best human being on there, I admit. But what I mean is that we have to call a spade a spade.
Yeah, great.
And so if someone is propagating, they call themselves a Christian.
Yeah.
A lot of them call themselves pastors or coaches or whatever they call themselves, and it makes, as pastors, it makes its way into our people's feeds all the time.
100%.
And so, like in LA, for example, what we've had is people who start to believe things that believe it's okay to believe and still be a Christian.
Right, because they've seen it modeled, they've seen it spoken about, seen it posted about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I actually think our first priority is not necessarily to be the voice in just the greater culture.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, this is what we believe, come believe what we believe. I think our first and foremost mandate, so to speak,
that's a good
is
word.
A very old school, charismatic word.
Well, it's appropriate.
Is to I think that as pastors, as church leaders, we've got to protect the sheep. And protecting the sheep means being willing to call out things that are pretending to be Christian that aren't. And what that's not doing is, I don't think that's participating in some culture war.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I think that's actually helping disciple people, teach people how to think. And that's a really difficult thing to do. But I think we have to figure out a way to do that. And again, not be the keyboard warrior, right? Mm-hmm. Which is to me, why podcasts like this are amazing.
Are crucial.
Because it's hey, let's actually talk about all these different things that are happening, that we're seeing, that we're reading. How do we make sense of this? How are we supposed to make sense of this as a Christian? And I actually do think we need to be louder than we've been before, in an intelligent, thoughtful, way. I don't know if that answers the question you were asking.
You hit. No, that was wise.
I didn't really know how to answer that, so I answered it.
You did a great job talking until it made sense.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly what I did. Thank you.
No, it's good. I just think when somebody when you said wolves, some people might not know what that's a biblical reference to sheep, goats, and wolves in sheep clothing. And I think that's profound and I love what you said. It was very wise. You said we may not need to be the bullhorn guy on a soapbox to unbelievers, but if there are people who are professing to be Christians and Christ followers, that's a first mandate.
Yep.
And I think the other thing is, as I was listening to you talk, just realizing how powerfully important the home is. Mm-hmm. Actually talking to your kids about biblical values, which means if you're on and you're listening, you're a parent, you have to know biblical values, which is, and we don't want to do that, right? We want to just feel good, go to church, hear a sermon that makes me feel good, sing a song that makes me have goosebumps.
Do you think that?
Do you know the Muffin Man?
Maybe
he can't even handle this.
In our Christian sort of culture world today, there is an expectation, let's say, from parents in churches that it's the youth pastors that pastor 100%. The pastors that pastors the kids, and so it's we'll let them deal with the stuff that's
the big stuff.
The big stuff.
Yeah. 100%.
Which I think is great. I mean, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I'm who I am today because I had you guys and amazing people in my life that discipled me. So I'm not discounting that.
And you didn't watch American Psycho.
And I didn't watch American Psycho or listen to Tupac anymore, apparently. Instead, I listen to DC Talk. But
I'm really sorry because I love Tupac and my daughter loves Biggie Smalls more than you even know. We listen to Hypnotize on the way to school almost every
hilarious.
Day. But it's okay.
I think you're right about the parents needing.
Yeah, and they do. I think that in everything we do, I mean, my goodness, currently training for a Spartan race, and I know people are getting tired of hearing me talk about it. Also, I'm remembering that my allergies are going crazy, so my eyes probably look like I've been hotboxing.
You're training for a Spartan race?
I am training for a Spartan race.
So, do you post like videos and stuff of you working out?
Yes, sure.
You do?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because you kind of like if you're a senior pastor and you work out, you have to post pictures of yourself working out. Otherwise, you're not really
literally
working out.
never posted a picture of myself working out.
I haven't either because I just don't.
That's my point. Not all of us have the great dad bod like you do. But
that's amazing you're doing a race, though.
My whole point is this.
Sorry. Yeah.
I want to eat like I want to eat.
Yeah.
And have a lifestyle like I want to have and be able to run the Spartan race in record time. And that's impossible. Like the race we signed up for, it's at elevation of 6,000 feet and it climbs 1,500 feet. It's stupid. I don't even know what I'm going to die. I'm going to literally die. And I think that parents and I think Christians in general, this is a sweeping generalization, would love to have all the faith, all the miraculous things that God does. There's a burp again. Whew. You can't handle the ADD of this.
No, I'm with you.
You're doing great. You just ignore it like an old sage. You kind of remind me of Master Shifu from Kung Fu Panda. Today is a gift.
Just have all the wisdom in the world.
You do. You're like, that's what you've
really
always been an old soul.
Good. Mm-hmm.
What's his name? Master Oogway. That's it.
I literally know.
Yesterday is history. Tomorrow's a mystery.
What movie is this?
Today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. That's what I think of. You're like Master freaking Oogway over here. That's like I'm burping. And you're just not even smiling. You're annoyed.
I'm not annoyed at all.
That's you. You are.
Listen.
We need to have serious conversation.
I'm just reading all your text messages that are.
There's two. There's one that came in. My point is this. Here's what I'm trying to say to you. I'm trying to say this. We want all the benefits without the hard work.
Yeah.
And then when the crap hits the proverbial fan, we want to moan about it. We want to complain about it. We want to blame everybody else about it. And really, we have sort of prerogative to do something. So in the family, we have to start by teaching what the values of the Word of God are. And let's just be honest. There's some hot topic items right now. Nobody's arguing over circumcision anymore. Right. So the hot topic items are around Christian sexual ethic, abortion, gender, and maybe immigration, but that's not even a big of a deal because equity, Dylan Mulvaney, equity, inclusion, and all that stuff. So those are the ones we have to actually know and talk about. So you can do some research. We talk about that here in this podcast and at the church because we want people to know. But at the end of the day, you got to teach in the home.
Totally.
You feel good about that?
100%. And I have a 2-year-old son, so I have no understanding of how that works. But I do know I want to do absolute best.
Well, I'll tell you right now.
It's terrifying. I mean, the stuff that we hear, this sounds so like alarmist, but like the stuff we hear that is being taught in schools,
specifically
that's
in
not actually directly being taught, right, in Los Angeles. So like, for example, our next door neighbor, she's got a son who's in the 3rd grade. Sent him he has some food allergies. So first day of school this year, sent him to school with a packed lunch and some new school supplies. She picked him up at the end of the day. He goes to an LA public school. Picked him up at the end of the day. He had an unopened lunch and unopened school supplies. And at this school, nobody gets to bring their own lunch or school supplies because they give every kid the exact same lunch and the exact same school supplies so that no kid feels any different than the other.
Interesting.
And that's like a super subtle.
Yep.
Okay, that's like insanely subtle, but
I'm removing the need for the parents of authority.
No explanation, which literally, if you look at the scope of what that is, just that basic situation, that's like a kid coming home asking, hey, mom or dad, how come so-and-so has more expensive shoes than I do? How come they eat this and I eat this? Or how come it's like, actually, that's life that needs to be explained. And if you look at it from that super like tiny level,
infinitesimal,
you're actually teaching every kid, well, you're the same. Or at least you're the same in here, and everyone needs to think everyone is the same.
We're teaching the kids that the authority, the government authority, gives you your value.
Yes, exactly. Which is
what's terrifying.
And so that's like such a small thing, I know.
No.
But if you think about the subtleties on the surface, that feels really kind.
And there are people listening to Compassionate Hearts right now are going, oh my gosh, thank God we're giving meals to kids who don't have money. So it's not what you're not saying is we shouldn't help kids who can't afford to take care of.
No, I'm
lunch.
definitely saying that.
I'm
hate totally
poor
kidding.
Kids.
I'm not saying that at all.
You're like, oh, those freaking poor kids. Where are you from? Southeast LA?
I don't call them poor kids. I call them poors.
You're not.
Okay?
You're definitely not from Orange County. Oh my God. So I grew up poor.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, it's all right. It must be nice to have your white privilege. I grew up excruciatingly poor, and I did on food stamps, and like we would go to. I guarantee no one listening has ever heard of Super One Foods. None of you have. And so it was this grocery store that I don't even know how it existed. They would have Shasta. They wouldn't have name brand sodas. It would be like Dr. Shasta and Shasta Lightning, which was like the equivalent of Mountain Dew. And like they didn't have Fruit Loops. They had Fruity Holes in a bag.
Right.
Don't laugh. I'm not making that up. Why are you laughing? It's inappropriate. What's your problem? It's real. Okay, guys, I don't appreciate this. You guys are in it. Paul said to the pure, all things are pure.
Yep.
Let's get back on track. My point is this. We would go to the cash register, and this is also back when if you are on food stamps, you get a card. It looks like a credit card. Back then, it looked like Monopoly money or like the Chinese yen. And so you go to the cash register, shut up, Brooklyn. I don't care if it's the right currency. That's my daughter. She's over there making fun of me. We go to the cash register, and you're buying like Dr. Shasta and like flour and probably Velveeta because we were from Texas and we ate that crap. Had to make queso with some powdered cheese concoction. And you would start pulling out this Monopoly money, and the 16-year-old punk kid cash register would be like, and then would pull up the phone and be like, we have food stamps on aisle 4. The guy with the cut-off sweat shorts right here, his embarrassed son next to him, they're very poor people. Can I have some help for the food? Again, food stamps.
Yeah.
Do you see? He's running away.
Yeah. In Dallas. They probably live in an apartment.
Yeah, they did. We definitely lived in an apartment. Then hang up the phone. And then like the ambulance would show up because nobody knew how to do food stamps. And like I think Governor Rick Perry was there.
It's actually kind of heartbreaking. That's kind of heartbreaking to think about you in that scenario.
Well, but here's the thing. Thank you. You're so compassionate. You're not compassionate towards poor kids today, but poor Carey.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Michael's very compassionate for the listeners.
I am.
We're going to lose listeners. All 6 are going to stop listening. Here's my point. That was challenging, but it also built character.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one thing I love is to see my dad stand there.
Yeah.
And not be wavered and go, I can't change this right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to move. I'm not going to humiliate my son. And we bought the groceries. And I think we were on food stamps for a total of like 6 months or 8 months because my dad was like, we are not going to mooch off the system. We can't do anything now, but we need this. And I think that's what the system should be.
Totally.
And so the point is, I think there's something to the character building of the pain of life because life is painful.
100%.
100%. It doesn't get easier as you get older.
No.
And we rob children of opportunities for growth. Now, that doesn't mean I think we should subject them to pain.
Totally.
And I'm not talking about abuse that is pain.
Exactly. Or yes,
neglect.
of course, if someone needs help and their family needs help. Yeah. 100%.
It's like the whole notion of everybody gets a trophy because everybody wins.
Exactly.
Which is absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
Like if nobody wins at all things in life ever.
Right.
I know you do. You're awesome. But it doesn't happen. And so you rob children, you rob people of opportunity. So we're not even talking about winning trophies in soccer.
Yeah. But I feel like I got us off track, but with the story about the school. But I think the point is that on the surface, again, it looks loving and kind.
Yes.
And really what I think we're doing is we are robbing an entire generation of how to think and be strong.
Yeah.
And if, like where does it end? Now we sound like the people we were talking about. Where does it end? But you do have to ask that question. Where does it end?
Yeah, but I was just thinking when you said that and you got us back on track, it was so gracious of you. You did it so gently. I was thinking about even in the Garden of Eden, when Satan shows up to deceive the weaker vessel. I'm kidding. I knew. I was going to. Down. When the enemy shows up to deceive Adam and Eve, he doesn't come with this aggressive approach. He comes with, it almost was compassionate. Did he really say you would die? And then he comes in and he goes, you're not going to die. You're going to know more. This is better for you. And so I'm not suggesting that the government is the devil, Bobby Boucher.
Right.
I'm just saying that that it's just because it's masked in compassion doesn't make it right.
Right.
And so the question to come back to is, what's the role of the church? So we definitely need to be teaching in our homes. And I love that you said we don't need to be aggressively going after those that aren't Christians. Mm-hmm. We definitely need to be standing up against but speaking truth to Christians who are propagating false information and a lack of theology. But what about like the regular Joe who he's going to work tomorrow or he's driving to work now and he's going to go sit in a cubicle and he's got, people that he sits around or she sits around that are woke or maybe they don't even know what they think, but it's a weird environment. They don't know what to say. What do you think about what's their step? If they're a follower of Jesus and they're like, I don't like this that's happening, but I don't want to say anything.
Yeah. So I just read this interesting statistic so 10, even 15 years ago, let's say you were living in your neighborhood and let's say your neighbor found out you were a Christian. Their immediate, if questioned about you, they would automatically assume that you were more moral than they were and that you were kinder and more generous than they were. That is now flipped. So you live in a neighborhood in many parts of the country.
Sure.
So I live in a neighborhood. I find out my next door neighbor is a Christian. Likely, I now, at least in a lot of parts of the country, instead of believing them to be the more moral person, I believe them to be the less inviting, less
tolerant, right,
less tolerant.
Wow.
So I think the thing that we have to remember is that with non-Christians, with the lost, that
the lost sheep of Israel, Michael.
There is the lost sheep of Israel, God's chosen people. Thank you. It's actually, I actually think, and this is where it gets super practical and super pastoral, but do you even have a relationship with someone?
Great.
Can you question someone putting their pronouns in their email signature if you don't even have any kind of relationship with them whatsoever? And so I think, honestly, as basic as it sounds, is if you're a Christian at a workplace, are you actually just loving the people that you work with and being kind to them and actually going and grabbing a beer with them after work or asking about their family and building equity in that relationship with them? Not so that you can do gotcha.
Yeah. Not a bait and switch.
But so that you're building because what will happen is at some point they will be experiencing something difficult. And because we take ourselves to work, you'll know it and a conversation will open up. And then I think that's when those conversations can be had.
Just that whole concept of relationship preceding
100%.
any type of challenge. And I think that's profound, and investing for the sake of investing in them because they're humans.
Exactly.
And not to invest in them to prove your point or to convert them to your political party.
Exactly. I think that's the key, right? It's just and remember, it's not the person, it's the idea.
Great.
You're not critiquing a person, you're critiquing an idea.
Great.
And you actually can have a relationship with somebody who has different ideas than you. And I think that has to be step number one. The problem is that's the long, what is it Eugene Peterson talks about, a long, slow walk in the same direction.
Yeah.
It's
a lost art. That's a lost art.
It's a really lost art, especially when the younger you are, the less time you stay at a job. But we're not
right.
That's a whole different conversation for a whole other day.
Yeah.
But I just think that's all you can do. Build relationship and not show up every day going, I'm the champion of truth at this workplace. And
look at my Lord's Gym t-shirt.
I'm going to leave the Daily Wire up on my computer screen.
Yeah.
I hope that my next,
I hope you see Ben Shapiro's face. And ask me about it.
Don't be the meme. Right?
Yeah. Great. I love it. With your Tiva sandals.
Exactly.
Love it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's great. I do think it's important that you, for yourself, have the right and responsibility to stand up for yourself, but to do so in a non-arrogant, the words I'm thinking of are not appropriate because our podcast will get an E explicit by it, but just don't be that jackwagon.
Yeah. I heard a really cool example of this in a story recently that I thought was really smart.
Why don't you share that with us, Michael?
Would that be helpful?
Story time with Michael Whittle.
It's
Robert
kind of
Michael Whittle,
the wise as innocent, wise as what?
Serpents,
wise
harmless as dove.
Yeah,
great.
So I heard a story about a pastor.
Let me tell your story for you.
Yeah, a pastor in a major urban city, and he was trying to get in a building to rent for his church. And he found out that the board of the building they were trying to rent was all incredibly progressive. And he knew what their statement and belief was, and he knew what they believed, and they weren't going to waver on that. And so they were having this big meeting to sort of talk about, hey, this is an issue that we're not really going to be able to And he said, I literally just prayed before I went in and said, God, if this comes up, I need you to help me talk about it in a way that's not offensive, but that also stands up for what we believe as a church. And so the conversation comes up, and he kind of just looks to them and says, hey, listen, we're two people with two different worldviews and sets of ideas. I want to be really tolerant and respectful of yours, and I'm just hoping that you can be tolerant and respectful of mine.
Great.
And not essentially, he kind of like used their language to sort of kind of say like, hey, listen, I'm not necessarily coming in here trying to keep you from doing something because of your belief. You're the inclusive ones. Yeah. I would hope that in your openness and inclusivity, you would not prevent me.
Excellent.
From and he said it just like the room went silent. Everyone kind of looked around, and they were like, okay, we're going to let you rent this building.
That's great.
And I think like, that's not some super smart statement. It's just kind of saying like, hey, we're all humans. Do we have to pit each other against one another?
That's fantastic. And it's not, it's disarming.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes, man, even I'm thinking about like the majority of the fights that Megan and I have in our marriage is because
they're all your fault.
Megan has major issues, but she's seeing a lot of therapists.
Yeah, driving you.
Really,
to
what
them.
I say
She's seeing a lot of their offices while waiting for you to come out of the therapy appointment.
Megan, if you'll just model how I live, your life will be better.
Follow me as I follow Christ.
That's what I say to her. I say one way, Jesus, and it has been. That's where I've seen the most growth in her. No, I'm kidding. The biggest. That's not true, but I mean, she's fantastic. I see the therapist and she prays for me. But my point is this, the majority of the fights that we get into, we end up arguing about things that were not the origin of the conversation. It's like I drank her LaCroix and she's upset. But when she said, "Did you drink my LaCroix?" I was like, well, "Why do you give me an attitude?" And she said, "I didn't give you an attitude." What, And then all of a sudden it's like, pow, 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 pow.
Yep.
And we've created this environment where neither of us want to be vulnerable. Neither of us want to have an actual conversation. We want to prove the other person wrong. And when she fails over and over at that again, no, I'm kidding. But that's the biggest challenge. Is it's not a safe environment to have actual conversation. I love what your friend did, or whoever it was that did that. Maybe you just made that story up, but I'm grateful. It's a parable. I think that there's something beautiful about that. And we have a woman in our church, and I may get the story slightly wrong, but works for a company, and they send out an email mass to the whole company. Hey, I want you to start adding your pronouns to the signature of your email. And she was conflicted because she's like, I don't want to lose my witness, but I don't agree with this because that's just not who I am. And she prayed through it, and it was like genuine, like, I really want to do this right. And she just went respectfully to her boss and said, I really want to honor you, and I'm grateful for my job. I love what I do. But for me to do that is a conflict of what I believe. She didn't shoot it back and like to reply to all. She had a private, she had a private conversation, and her boss was like, absolutely. And I understand, and thank you. And I think so it's one thing if you're talking to somebody and they're asking questions about what you believe. It's also another thing to make sure you're standing up for what it is you believe for yourself. We can't be passive on every side and hope that we're going to even remotely head in a healthy direction. But it's challenging. It's not easy. And so if we just drink Bud Light, no, I'm kidding. I'm not an advocate for Bud Light or any beer of that matter.
That's right.
That's not true. What else do we want to talk about? We've hit everything we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Let's talk church hurt. Okay. We could talk church hurt.
Let's do it.
We could also talk about women in ministry. Why are you laughing so hard?
Why do you just... You're poking...
The bear?
Poking the bear.
She's sitting right over there. We've already done one on women in ministry. And memory. I think here's my thought is, why don't you give us a concluding thought for the podcast today? Because we got a lot of listeners who are much younger than me, who are just trying to figure out, how do I navigate the world that I live in and be a follower of Jesus and not be a jackwagon, but also not be silent. I want you to speak to that individual. And, they're probably in their 20s, early 30s, and the world that they know is vastly different than the world that I know.
Yeah.
I grew up in a hardcore conservative home, couldn't watch cartoons because Gargamel from the Smurfs prayed to Beelzebub, so we had to watch Gospel Bill, Willie George, and Miss Lana. We had to watch that kind of stuff growing up, and all my friends would make fun of me. They're doing Care Bear Stare, but that was demonic. So, that's my life. So I come from such a completely different background, but you even spoke to it. I'm giving you time to think. You spoke to it. You didn't grow up in a Christian home. You're in Los Angeles, which is one of the 3 or 4 most extremely liberal cities in our nation. So what would you say to a young person listening that's just like, how do I navigate through this life as a Christian?
Gosh, I'm going to sound like such a pastor.
Let's go. That's a good thing. By the way, that's okay.
I think the first thing is, I think you have to actually know what you believe, right? And why you believe it. So I think the days of just doing Christianity on inspiration is done. I honestly don't think you're going to make it. It's too confusing. I'm confused. Part of the journey I've been on the last few years is because in April, May, and June, and July of 2020, I was like, wait a minute, what do I believe about what? How,
Great.
You know what I mean? So I think you absolutely just have to know what the Bible says. What does it mean? Ask the question, what does it mean, before you ask, what does it mean to me?
Great.
Right?
Great.
Like love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, right?
Yeah.
So I think you have to know, which means I think you have to make time to learn and study. And that doesn't mean you have to be a scholar, but it means you have to know enough to be able to back what you really believe. So I think that's huge. I think the other thing is I think remembering that people are people, and the ideology that they're swept up in isn't like a necessary indication of who they are, right? And so I think it's being soft and kind, but also not willing to give a pass to something when something needs to be spoken about, right? And then I think it's just finding that balance. I personally don't think it can be done without the guidance of the Holy Spirit.
Fantastic.
Honestly. Yeah. So I think if you're trying to do it basically just out of knowledge, it's just
toast.
Knowledge puffs up, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's all of the basics, but it's like making it a vigilant discipline to do those basics. I think it sounds so cliche, but I don't know how you do it without knowing our Bible, reading our Bible, spending time with God, being involved in a local church, having people in our lives that we bounce these off of and that we have these conversations with.
Great.
And then honestly, kind of take a break from the noise every now and then, and when you do engage in this stuff and try and wrap your head around it, find some stuff that goes in depth. And does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense.
I just think we cannot. We have to challenge ourselves intellectually so that we know this stuff.
Not just inspirationally, but also knowledge
without the grace that comes with the Holy Spirit is,
Yeah, it's not worth it. As you're talking, that was profound and great. And as you're talking, I was thinking one of the things that I've seen emerge so much over the last 3 years specifically is the deconstruction of the church. I wouldn't even call it deconstruction. A good friend of mine, he has a podcast with some buddies. It's called Bros, Bibles, and Beer. And it's one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. They're great dudes. And one of the guys on there, his name is Andy. And he says, I don't like to call it deconstruction, because the idea of deconstruction is I'm going to tear it down to build it back up. But what we're seeing is demolition, just exploding it. And I think that one of the things I've seen is that so many followers of Jesus, as we cross the threshold of the last 3 years, they're so frustrated with the church, they're hurt by the church, or would say that they're hurt by the church. And and just kind of like disgruntled with that. And in that process, kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. Why don't you speak to that for a minute, like to the people who are listening, or maybe even some things you've seen.
Yeah.
And before, I won't say any more. So why don't you speak to that? Because I have some thoughts regarding that, but speak to that for a minute.
I think that, first of all, church hurt is a real thing, because to borrow from a friend of mine, where there's people, there's problems.
Right.
But I think it's identifying where, like, what are you hurt by? Are you hurt because the small group leader responded like without an exclamation point in their email to you, or they held you accountable to something you said you were going to do? Like, what? Like, I think it's actually worth going, I'm hurt. What exactly am I hurt by?
Yeah.
Is this? And I think it's a really easy scapegoat.
Totally.
I also think there's really bad situations.
Totally.
And it's real, and there are crappy small group leaders and pastors, and also just people who have bad days.
Yep.
And so I think the big thing is, and I've been through church hurt in a sense of like, I've experienced it just like anybody else has experienced it. And through especially my early 20s, the last thing I wanted to do was be in church. But I remembering what God did in my life when I got saved, I knew that it wasn't something I could just like walk away from. Great. So for me, the only reason I made it through my season of church hurt is just because I kept going. And I think that's one of the quickest things we do, is we just say like, well, I'm going to just like throw this whole thing out because someone hurt my feelings, or whatever. And I think you have to like,
that's convenient. That's the convenient
really
way, right?
Convenient.
Yeah.
And I think there's also two different tracks. There's like, something upset me, someone hurt my feelings. I think oftentimes we like project our wants, needs, and desires on our church.
Oh yeah,
and
great.
then if that doesn't if that doesn't fulfill the thing we want to fulfill, like at the end of the day, we're adults, but guess what? We still want to belong to this group or that group or this whatever. And so like, it's not church hurt when like the stuff we wanted. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think you have to actually define, what am I hurt by?
Great.
Before you can actually understand like, what do I do about it?
Great.
And most of what I see and experience is, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like, I didn't get to sit at the right lunch table, or I wanted to do this.
Didn't get picked for dodgeball.
For this, or hey, I had an idea that they didn't run with, or the personality of this leader I don't mesh well with, or whatever. And I think like, that's not hurt. That's just normal life.
Yeah, great.
And so I think you have to be able to distinguish between, what exactly am I hurt by?
How does that
make sense?
It totally does. It's easy for me as a current sitting senior pastor to say that all church hurt is silly people with hurt feelings. You didn't let me have the cordless mic on the worship team. I had to have the cord, and how come I couldn't lead out in the song?
They only let me lead the fast song.
And hey, why can't I be the one leading a group? I have to go to your group. Blah 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 blah. Or, you signed the honor code and you said you weren't going to sleep with your boyfriend, and now we're not going to let you continue because you did.
That's not hurt. That's called confronting sin.
Yeah.
That's what we're called to do with one another.
Yeah.
The person that. Never mind.
Yeah. So I think it's easy for me to be like, yeah, okay, but there are some valid scenarios. I've experienced some pain. I don't like to call it church hurt personally, because the church can't hurt you. People in the church can, and people in the church people in life will hurt you. And I think about Jesus was betrayed by one of his closest friends, and was abandoned by all but one of them. Was denied 3 times by Peter. So talk about being hurt by people. I mean, like, I just think about sometimes, I'm going to take a rabbit trail, but I think about that moment when Jesus is on trial, and he and Peter make eye contact, and Peter's denying him. Like, Jesus going, come on, I just wish you had just stood up for me. Or like Joseph of Arimathea, who wasn't there. Nicodemus, who wasn't there. Like, obviously it's not going to change the course of history, but just be there, you know? So that there's no doubt about that. There's that. So how did you navigate through the valid parts that were painful? And how'd you differentiate the valid parts that are painful and maybe just some of your insecurities on display? I mean, and we all, I'm not attacking you.
No, totally.
But we all have insecurities. And I just find more often than not, when I get my feelings hurt, it's because my insecurity is triggered. And it's less because of something that someone actually did.
100%. Yeah, and we project past hurts and pains on the current people that we're are doing that with. I think, I think there's a couple things. I think there is some very serious, not very serious, but it as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, I experienced some stuff that shook my identity, my security. And I think that you have to also, and this is just going to sound so cliche, but like you have to look at the big picture of everything that happened and realize you're not the center of everything.
Great.
So, hey, all this stuff that happened to me wasn't some like there wasn't a bunch of people going, we really want to hurt this kid.
Right.
It was like, no, actually, when I know what was going on here and what this person, was struggling with and all of that, it's like you sort of go, okay, so maybe I was some collateral damage. Right?
It doesn't make it right.
It doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't. I mean, I remember when I first started getting back into church leadership, going to church meetings, I'd get panic attacks on the way to church leaders, to meetings. And I had to really work through that. For me, I had people in my life like yourself that talked me through that. I would talk to a therapist about it, and that was like really difficult level stuff. I think in day-to-day church life, faithful are the wounds of a friend. I'd rather have someone, I would much rather value somebody who wounds me from time to time than always affirms everything I do.
Great.
I say watch out for the person that affirms everything.
Oh, yeah. Great.
So is it church hurt, or do you actually have like really good friends, or maybe not friends, but people that really care about you?
Right.
So I know I'm going a bit all over the place.
You're doing great.
I don't know if I'm answering your question. So I think, again, it's figuring that out. And it's trying to determine that. And then having the people in your life to go to and say, hey, am I being, help me see this in a charitable, gracious way to the person who hurt me.
Excellent.
I think if you do any other thing, now obviously there's cases of abuse.
Right.
Like we're giving a massive disclaimer that
we're not talking about a pastor who sexually molests a child here.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not talking about someone who's stealing money from a staff member.
Exactly.
We're talking about the common things that happen between church leadership and church laity.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just go, what do I know about this person and what they're dealing with? What are the insecurities I know they have? What are the insecurities I know I have? And then I think, the minute you start to go from like, okay, no one's for me to everyone's against me, or this person's not for me, but now they're against me, like you need to like legitimately go, okay,
pump the brakes.
This is actually, regardless of what this person did to me, this actually isn't the way that I need to think about this.
Yeah, great.
And so it's like, I have family members that are in AA, and it's radical ownership and going like, gosh, not necessarily what did I do to cause this or contribute to it, but I can't control what they did.
Great.
But I don't want to be, what's the classic thing? It's like me taking poison. What's the, the classic thing?
Taking rat poison and waiting for the other person to die. Yeah.
And so, and then I just think that, and then I think if something or someone, whether it's a pastor, a leader, or just another person, like if you are letting something fester over a long period of time and you don't go to that, they're oblivious to what they've done. Good. You're actually now telling stories in your head.
Yeah.
And so like, it just takes like some boldness and courage to say, hey, this actually really hurt my feelings. Or, hey, this hurt me, or hey, I feel like and that's church community, right? And that's actually healthy. So like, there actually should be tension.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful.
I don't know if any of that is what you're asking.
No, it's beautiful. And if I may dovetail on that, going to someone doesn't mean that how you respond will be dependent upon how they respond.
Right.
Because they might think, well, you're an idiot, or they might continue and perpetuate, or they might go, I don't even know what you're talking about. That's irrelevant. But having the conversation is step one. That's in Matthew 18. Go to your brother who sinned against you.
You don't talk to somebody else to help process. That's the new thing.
Oh, gosh.
The new thing is, can you help me process something?
Right.
As
it's
I just
baloney. Let me just vomit gossip.
Right. No, that's gossip.
Yeah.
And that person, it's like my wife, or if I'm talking to you, let's just say hypothetically, Jill, I come to you.
We're really worried about your gossip issues, Jill.
Yeah. No, but let's say I come to you and I'm talking to you about something that my wife and I are going through.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not just gonna take my side.
No.
You're gonna go, actually, Michael, let's look at you.
Yeah.
Let's look at
I'm gonna call your wife, like, what's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if you are routinely talking to people that are continuing to perpetuate
it's an echo chamber
hurt and pain, then you're actually not talking to the right person.
No.
You want the person that's going to go like, I want my friends, I want to have to like yell and scream at them for them to be like, finally feel how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Because I want them to always go, what can you learn from this?
Great.
And I think that it's all about the people you process.
That takes high maturity and emotional quotient, because we want the heroes of our day are victims.
Yes.
So if you are a victim, you are a heroine in our world today, in our current cultural moment. And so the more you're a victim, the more you're celebrated, the more, oh my gosh, they've wronged you. And I mean, you see that in almost every news case today. It's how do we lift up the victim? And I understand the heartbeat of where that comes from. And it is good to make sure that we're taking care of people who have been victimized with actual
100%
abuses.
Yes.
But it takes a strong person to surround themselves with friends who are not an echo chamber.
Right.
And if you, like you said, if you only have people perpetuating gossip and hurt, you're actually slowly drowning. You just don't even know it. Because now the narrative that you have spun up about that person or that instance or that church or that entity, it now is bleeding into every relationship, probably not with peers, but every authoritative relationship that you have, because you have established yourself as the victim and all other people are the oppressors. And that is a damning place to
really
be,
is.
because it leads to a small life, marginalized living. It leads to midlife crisis of epic proportion that you don't even know are coming in 15 years because you have surrounded yourself with people who just go, oh, that was horrible. They should have never done that. This is the apps. And so again, we're separating from extreme cases. And even when they're valid, all of the pastors in our life, if we have an open line to those pastors, but in our marriage, if we're ever in a fight, and sometimes we threaten each other, I'm about to call our overseers right now. And then sometimes we're like, just go for it. Do it. And we know all of our overseers will, if Megan calls them, they will go, well, what did you do, Megan? And if I call them, they'll go, well, Carey, what did you say? What did you do? All right, let's get both of you on the phone. And then they'll say, Carey, stop being a knucklehead. Megan, that was not appropriate. And so what that does is it brings strength to us, because we realize I don't just have someone in my life who's telling me what I freaking want to hear.
Right. I know.
But we love that in this world. And so if you're listening still and you have some church hurt, man, our heart goes out to you.
Totally.
We've both experienced.
I've seen, you can cut this part out if you want.
Just don't say names.
The reason I think that you are so equipped to talk about this specifically is because I've seen you walk through that. I've actually seen, like, you know what I mean? So I think you're not saying this as someone who's like actually been detached from it.
Sure.
You're actually saying it from someone who's like gone through it.
Sure.
And kept, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to like,
no, that's fair.
Honor where honors due.
Thank you.
But I am saying, but in all honesty, you have walked through it, and you've served God through it, and you've built the church through it. And so I think you actually do have an authority to speak to it, because you have experienced at levels that you would win most competitions.
Maybe.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Maybe. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that.
Anyways, so
I appreciate you saying that.
So I say all that to say neither one of us are up here just go, just get over it.
Right. I appreciate you saying that.
We also have experienced it and walked through it.
Yeah. And what I've experienced is very real hurt and pain. And I've experienced real, honestly, if I'm being candid, it triggered at the deepest core of my greatest insecurities.
Yes.
And that was the part I hated, is I actually gave people power in my life because I allowed moments of something said, something spoken to other people, something spoken from pulpits, to almost mold into concrete negative personal affirmations. Yep. So I actually gave that moment more power than it deserved by letting it resonate, by meditating on it, by believing it, and then it became so powerful that now I'm doing more work excavating that than if I had just chosen in that moment to go, oh, they had a bad moment, like you said.
Yeah, and actually are still very loving and honoring and gracious about those people.
Yeah, yes. But thank you. Stop talking about me.
Yeah, more about you.
My point is, it is in the moment, it's extremely challenging to think, I'm going to choose forgiveness.
Yeah.
But there is so much more damage on the other side of bitterness that, like when I say like those foundational thoughts that were like set in concrete, and I can remember I was standing when things were said. And so they'll be accountable for how they treated me, but I am responsible for how I let it impact me. And so if you're listening and you're struggling with church hurt, maybe a great thing to do would be to just ask the Holy Spirit to show you where you can learn, you can grow, and more importantly, this is going to rhyme, where you can let go. Because you might be holding yourself back.
Yep.
And
because that person's not thinking about it.
No, they don't even care.
And it's hamstringing you. I've spent too many years being hamstrung by that. Only to find out that person's like,
what?
I don't even remember that.
Yeah. Was I alive at that point? I don't even know.
Yep.
Anyways, Michael, it's been a pleasure, man.
Thank you for having me.
You have been divine, and it's been great having you on here. For those of you that are tuning in, man, my name is Carey. This is Michael Whittle. My wife and I pastor a church right here in Orange County, California, the Movement Church. Come check it out and hang out. Michael just left the faith, and we're praying for his salvation.
I'm coming home.
I'm coming
I've deconstructed.
home.
I haven't yet reconstructed.
He's reconstructing, but we are so glad that you are with us on this episode of MC Unpacked. Will you come back?
Absolutely.
Let's go. Part 2 coming at you sometime in the future. We love you. Talk to you soon.